Hi, it's Paul. On this video I thought I'd do something a little bit different and talk about string breakage and why strings break on your rackets. So I have a racket here which I will cut in a minute, but let's just talk about why they break. Most of the time we find that it's the main strings, which are these strings, that break on badminton rackets. And usually we find the breaking in this area, or sometimes you might find the center ones that break, but a lot of the times it's kind of this area where we have the problems. Now this could be through a couple of reasons. The first reason could just be it's a mishit and we catch the shuttle at a close proximity to the frame, and the pressure we place on that string as it pushes against the grommet is so vast that it breaks the string. The other reason these areas tend to break is because the strings wear on the outside. A lot of the rackets we see these days, the strings sit above the racket frame. I don't know if you can see that. Let's try and get it a little bit closer. See, the strings are a little bit proud, and because of that we scoop shuttles off the floor, and as soon as we do that we are scraping the string on the floor. Over time this is going to wear, and then at some point we hit somewhere in this area and that's it, the string is worn out and it breaks. The other area that we do see quite a bit of string breakage can come from over here. And we see all these grommets are worn, and that's because people taking rackets out of the bags, they're catching zips, and zips are metal, and it can cause abrasion. And as soon as that happens, we're wearing this part of the string out. And even though we might be hitting here, this is becoming weaker. And eventually, when we do hit, the string may pop, but it might have gone from here. So that's another reason. Of course, the other reason is that you haven't had a restring for a long time. The elasticity has gone out the strings. They're old, they're worn, and at that point they're ready to break. And so it can just go any time. We do kind of say that if you're playing 2 or 3 times a week, then you should be having at least 2 or 3 restrings a year. And that's just a guideline and nothing more. If you have high tension in your rackets, then the strings are more prone to breakage than if you had a lower tension. But you have a high tension for a reason. You like the fact that you gain more control with that string at that particular tension. So there's a trade-off, and as long as you accept that, then you recognise you may break more strings because of the higher tension. And this is what happens with the professional players. They don't miss hit very often, but they have extremely high tension in their rackets because they like the control they get from that string. Unfortunately, the trade-off is they will get more breakages, and breakages tend to happen at key moments in a rally. Sometimes it's at that point where the shuttle's gone in the net because the string broke when they hit the shot. Nothing can be done about that. I do want to talk a little bit about racket maintenance within this as well. That these grommets are really important here, and when they wear, because the string sits in the grommet, and you won't be able to see that probably too clear on this video, but the string sits in there and wears a groove in the grommet. Eventually, if a racket is continually strung the same way, that groove at the top of the head gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and can wear out completely. That means the string is now sitting against the frame. Well, if it's doing that, it's more likely we are going to get breakage in that area. So whenever I am restringing a racket, and this is for most stringers anyway, we will check the grommets. We check the inside of the frame, and we're looking for grommets that have split. If they're split, then we already know that the string could be catching the inside of the frame and therefore is more prone to breakage. That doesn't mean to say the string will break there, it's just a higher risk. If we hit the shuttle in that zone, then the risk becomes even greater. But on the outside, if we don't replace the grommet, or some stringers prefer to just turn the grommet so it gets more life, then we are effectively allowing that string to sit against the frame. This is where sometimes we see, especially the carbon's a little bit weak, we see collapse in the frame at that point. But most of the time we just see that the string is sat so low that there isn't a groove anymore, it's touching the frame. I prefer to take those grommets out and replace them with fresh. Some stringers prefer to turn them maybe once, maybe twice, so you got a bit more head on the grommet again and it performs a good function. There's nothing wrong with doing that, it's just my preference when the grommet's at that stage, it's relatively old, it needs replacing in my opinion. More than likely there's wear on the inside of that grommet as well, so I might as well rip it out and replace it. So what happens if you're in a game and your string breaks? Now I'm going to cut a string here, so watch out for this. Now that frame, as you can see here, is now pulled out a little bit, just a tiny bit, but it's just moved. What should happen now is when I get off court, straight away I should try and balance this and cut all the strings. Sometimes you have to go straight back on and play, so I recommend as soon as you can after that game you cut the rest of the strings in your frame, so you're protecting the entire frame. So I am going to balance that off. You see how that's moved? Now if I cut from the centre and I'm cutting either side, I'm creating a balance. Some people, they have shears and they just go and they just cut a lot. That's fine too. Just do the job. Don't leave a racket with a broken string, because what will happen is the pressure on the point where it goes remains, and if you continue to leave that racket, then that point is becoming weaker and weaker and you could end up with a crack in the frame. You are stressing that point in that racket and at some point it will pop. Now whether it does it now or later or just becomes very, very weak for a long time, who knows? You know, we can't see inside the frame to know what is happening. But I always recommend that as soon as your string breaks, try and cut the strings so there isn't any doubt at all and that frame is well and truly protected. So there's no tension at all on that frame. So whenever you break a string, make sure as quick as you can cut the rest of the strings. If you can, carry a pair of either stringing shears or good pair of scissors in your bag so you can cut the strings. You may use scissors for your grips as well, but I always recommend carry them. Make sure you dispose of your string properly. Don't leave it on the floor in the leisure centre or wherever you're playing. But please make sure you look after this racket. You know, if you treat the frame well, you look after it, then this racket could last you for many, many years. You know, providing we don't have collisions on court. So there you go. We've covered some of the main reasons for string breakage, which is pressure against a frame because we've got high tension, or it could be split grommets, it could be worn on the outside, it could be we've been scraping the shuttle off the floor for so long. So we covered all that. We talked a little bit about grommets and changing grommets and the reason why, and now I've just shown you as soon as a string breaks, balance, cut the rest out, so you know you protect your frames at all times. See you on another video.